afternoon. I am Ronit Barrett, Assistant General Counsel in the ComEd Regulatory Litigation Department, and also President of your Enabled Employee Resource Group. I would like to welcome you all to our webinar celebrating National Epilepsy Awareness Month, which is November, and Veterans Day, which is coming up next week. Some of you who know me know that epilepsy is very near and dear to my heart. I have 3 sons, and the oldest has epilepsy. I wish he was here in my office with me today to see this webinar and to know that he is not alone in his fight, but he has his nose to the grindstone at Whitney Young Magnet High School right now. But I have the next best thing. Here he is. It was senior night for the football team just a few weeks ago, and so all the moms got big heads of all our seniors, so I couldn't resist bringing him here for him to join us in spirit. And once you order a big head, you kind of want to use it as many times as you can. With that, I would like to turn this over to Brandon Laughlin of Cure Epilepsy to get us started. And I would just also like to note that we will be recording this session. So if you do not consent to being recorded, you can feel free to drop at this time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ronit, and thank you to all of you at ComEd for making this event possible. We are proud to partner with ComEd on this event through Epilepsy Awareness Month to really raise awareness of the critical need for more research in epilepsy in general, but specifically for some of the areas that we're going to kind of highlight today. So today I will kind of give everyone more of a epilepsy 101 kind of overview of what exactly is epilepsy, what exactly does Cure Epilepsy do, and kind of what people can do if they want to get more information or get more involved. So I will be sharing that in just a little bit, but I did invite 2 very close friends of Cure Epilepsy to join us today. So the first, I'm going to kind of let him kick it off here for us, since it is Epilepsy Awareness Month and it is Veterans Day coming up. I felt he was the perfect example of someone who can really show the breadth of epilepsy and how it can affect really anyone, anywhere, at any time. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it off and let Jack Summers kind of share his story. So Jack, go right ahead.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you everybody for joining. And thank you to the team at ComEd and Cure for putting this together and inviting me. It's a humbling privilege to be here. So my name is Jack Summers, and I grew up outside Chicago. Go Bears. And then after college, I attended University of Iowa, and then after college, I joined the Marine Corps. So I was stationed out at Camp Pendleton from 2007 till 2012. And during that time, I was an infantry officer. So I had groups of platoon or company here or there. And I went to Afghanistan in 2010 and had a grenade blast pretty close to me while we were out on patrol. And subsequently, about 6 months or 3 months later, when I got home from my my deployment to Afghanistan, I started having seizures, and not really knowing what that meant, I kind of tried to just, figure it out on my own. I didn't really want to totally compromise my career in the Marine Corps, but I knew something was wrong. And within about 12 months of that first seizure, I then had probably between 15 and 20 seizures. Now, this is part of just a very quick little background on it. Is what I was then subsequently diagnosed with was post-traumatic epilepsy, which that starts when you have a traumatic brain injury. And then one of the symptoms of that traumatic brain injury are seizures. This is a pretty small group. About 5% of epilepsy folks actually have post-traumatic epilepsy. There's a much higher percentage of those folks in the military. And so that's a little side note just to give you an idea of what exactly post-traumatic epilepsy, what that is. And so within about 18 months of that first seizure in 2010, I had so many other seizures, and I was then medically retired at the end of 2012 from the Marine Corps as a captain. Over the next 10 years, I'll kind of just go through it quickly. Over the next 10 years, I had more and more seizures. I was starting to feel kind of like the cognitive effects and wasn't really sure why I was losing some of my, uh, kind of like leadership abilities, some of my memory. Wasn't quite so good at working with groups. I didn't understand kind of the roles as well. And it started to affect, obviously, my social and my professional life without being able to drive and with almost 50 different treatment plans throughout those 10 years. I started to just have a lot of problems overcoming the different treatment plans that were happening, sometimes every few months, because when I would have a seizure, it would be, okay, let's start you on a new medication or let's increase the dosage. And at one point, I was on 5 different seizure medications. And now, almost 10 years after I was medically retired, I then was diagnosed with drug resistant epilepsy. So, kind of taking that, I've always been a huge advocate for the veteran community, for the military community, but I knew that I didn't just start having seizures or start having epilepsy late. Several of my Marines also started having seizures, which really that interested me as, hey, this can't just be 4 of us start having epilepsy when we're physically fit, mentally, emotionally. Everything was so strong between the 4 of us, but we just started having seizures. And so I really thought that it was an event occurred. That event was a traumatic brain injury. And I have been pushing really hard for the military, specifically for veterans, to understand the connection between traumatic brain injury and epilepsy, which is post-traumatic epilepsy. Very different from PTSD. Some of the symptoms are overlapping. Um, and so over the last probably couple of years with Cure Epilepsy, with a couple other organizations, I've gotten really involved as what they call lived experience advisor. And I'm an advisor for about 6 different projects or initiatives driven by private companies, nonprofit companies like Cure, as well as universities across the country. And this has been a huge part of my life. And so my goal is to share my information, share my journey, my experiences with those that are creating the newest technology to help folks with epilepsy, and hopefully turn my understanding and experiences into actionable steps that we can take to help those with epilepsy in the country, but globally ultimately. And the big part of this is finding veterans who have experienced traumatic brain injuries in the past. They might not have been diagnosed with it, but they experienced a traumatic brain injury, often in overseas in Iraq, Afghanistan, and connecting with them so that we can understand how likely or how likely it is that they may have a seizure, or have they already had one and they fall into the same category as me, where I don't want to talk about it. I didn't want anybody to know. It had a huge impact personally and professionally. And so as now this lived experience advisor, I'm really just raising awareness, having the opportunity to speak to folks on the other side of this that may know somebody in their family who has epilepsy, may know a service member or a veteran in their family or friends who was in combat. A lot have had traumatic brain injuries in combat, and connecting with them and finding out how we can work together with these private companies, with these nonprofits, and universities to develop the best technology invest into the research that's creating a better way forward so that hopefully nobody has to have 50 treatment plans like I did. It was an experience that I'm so happy I went through, but I don't want anybody else to go through that ever. And so overall, I hope that kind of helps explain a little bit of who I am, what post-traumatic epilepsy is, and some of the initiatives that I'm working on and how I'm trying to best give back to the community and support them. So once again, thank you everybody for joining, and thank you for allowing me to be here. It's really a privilege.
Thank you, Jack. That was, I know it's not always easy, even after you shared your story, 100 times to kind of share your story. So we appreciate you and all that you do. And I'll be referencing some of the things that you said here in the next couple of minutes, because I think it's important to fully understand, kind of the breadth of epilepsy. You really have to kind of look at some of the numbers that really will, I think, wow and shock some of you. I did want to make note, because I don't think I remember to do this at the beginning, that we will be having a Q&A section. So people feel free to ask questions. Jack and Channing are more than willing to answer questions about their epilepsy or share more information if there's anything that you'd like some further clarification on. So you can use the Q&A panel that is located in your WebEx control panel, or even simply the chat function, whatever works easier for you. So before I turn it over to our other speaker today, I thought it would be helpful to go ahead and just kind of give a little background, little Epilepsy 101, if you want to call it. We just really, if you haven't been to our website, well then, you won't know that this is a brand new website that we've debuted since September, I believe. So it's really a couple months old. It's really hopefully a very user-friendly site for people to go to. But we have a section there called Understanding Epilepsy, which is really what you need to know from a research and care standpoint for your epilepsy. So if you haven't got a chance, please do go ahead and check out our website. But just to kind of go through a little bit of background on who we are. So we were actually founded 26 years ago. I can't believe it. We have been around for over a quarter of a century. We were founded by mothers. Actually, some of you may recognize the last name Axelrod, but Susan and David Axelrod, their daughter, Lauren, was not controlled by current medications. And everybody in their lives were telling them that how they can live with epilepsy, how they can manage their epilepsy. Well, her and a few other mothers were quite confused by the fact that nobody was saying, well, how do you cure our epilepsy? And so that's kind of the beginnings of how we became along. We were founded by actually 5 mothers who sat around a kitchen table and dreamt up this idea of a organization solely committed to funding research in epilepsy. And today we are now the largest private funder. So outside of the government, we are the largest funder of epilepsy research in the world. So our impact, I can since update this. We are now over 100 million raised to find a cure, over 310 grants awarded in 18 countries around the world. So that kind of gives you a little bit of breadth about us. We do fund epilepsy across the spectrum. You heard about Jack's specific type of epilepsy, which is called post-traumatic epilepsy. That is only one, just one fraction of the epilepsy types that are out there and how people develop their epilepsy. It's a very very wide-ranging disease, and unfortunately, it affects so many people in so many different ways and so many different etiologies that makes it that much more difficult to treat and eventually cure. So just to kind of give you a little bit of background on just kind of what is the difference, because a lot of people ask me, especially people that don't have that connection to epilepsy, what's the difference between epilepsy and a seizure? Well, epilepsy is a diverse group of neurological disorders of varying types and severities, and they are actually characterized by recurrent seizures. So seizures are an electrical disturbance that occurs in the brain that interferes with its normal function. Sounds pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Well, epilepsy basically is you have two or more of these unprovoked seizures that are more than 24 hours apart. Once you have two or more recurrent seizures more than 24 hours apart, you are considered to have epilepsy. So that's basically just kind of a little bit of 101 for you on the background of that. The causes of epilepsy really, like I said, can be anywhere from acquired, such as an infection or a physical brain injury. They can be genetic. They can be a result of a person's mutations in a person's genes. That can be passed along, or sometimes it may be completely at random. They can be metabolic, immune. The types of epilepsy can really go across. And you're looking over at a chart here on the left hand side, on the other side. This shows you how different epilepsies are then named, which is a whole nother more difficult lesson that we can talk about more in the quick Q&A if you have more questions, or I can provide some resources towards the end. But really what I want to show today is how common is epilepsy. 1 in 26 Americans will develop epilepsy in their lifetime. Think about that, 1 in 26. So out of every 26 people you know, chances are at least one of them will develop epilepsy in their lifetime. 1 in 10 of those will have a seizure. So that is really, truly the commonality behind epilepsy and seizures. Epilepsy is so common that it affects more people than multiple sclerosis, cerebral palsy, Parkinson's, and ALS all combined. That actually kind of shocks a lot of people when we talk about that. And then epilepsy does affect 3.4 million Americans. Roughly 65 million people worldwide currently live with epilepsy, and it is the 4th most common neurological disease behind Alzheimer's, migraines, and strokes. So another interesting fact for you. Epilepsy, how is it diagnosed? Well, epilepsy is diagnosed very different pattern for every individual, but in general, a simple test called an EEG is the most common test for an epilepsy diagnosis. You may see the little spike wave patterns and recognition of what an EEG is, and that is to determine whether there is electrical disturbances going on in the brain at a specific time. A lot of people will have to go through extended stays. It's what's called an epilepsy monitoring unit to actually determine whether they have epilepsy or not. And now, how is epilepsy treated? Well, this is a much more complex question than I'm kind of showing here, but while many patients do respond to anti-seizure medications currently, roughly about 2/3, still there's over 30% of patients who are considered medically intractable. That means they do not respond to traditional epilepsy treatments and therapies. So those patients that actually do kind of go through the treatment journey, the treatment process that people go through, about half of those patients will become seizure-free with the first anti-seizure medication. And then approximately 15% of those patients will achieve seizure freedom with a second or third medication. So that makes up the 2/3 that actually do achieve seizure freedom. Unfortunately, once you get past that second or third treatment medication, seizure freedom becomes much more difficult. And then people have to look towards other ways to actually kind of get some relief from their seizures. There are such things as seizure devices that can be more non-invasive, and then there can be such things as invasive procedures such as epilepsy surgery. And we'll hear more about that in just a minute or two. So talking about what's the impact of epilepsy economically, It's estimated that the epilepsy costs the U.S. about $28 billion per year. Despite the availability of over 40 anti-seizure medications, surgery, and devices, still that 1/3 of patients remain uncontrolled. And the 2/3 of patients who do achieve seizure freedom, and you heard Jack mention this a little bit, may still experience impacts from the medication side effects, the comorbidities, and unfortunately still the stigma behind epilepsy, one of the reasons that we're here today. For those who might want to learn more, I encourage you to visit our website, cureepilepsy.org, or visit our Facebook, our Instagram, our Twitter, or /X now, if you'd like to stay more abreast, and I can give you that information towards the end as well. But I will stop boring everybody with their Epilepsy 101 lesson today, and then turn it back over now to Channing Seidemann, one of our supporters here with Cure Epilepsy, who has been really fantastic in kind of launching a new program within Cure Epilepsy. In fact, so much so that Channing is now actually serving as our community engagement coordinator with Cure Epilepsy and working as an intern position and really doing some amazing work with us and really showing us how that patient perspective can be important, not only in research like Jack suggested, but also in our everyday operations of the nonprofit. So Channing, I'm going to let you go ahead and take it over from here.
Thanks, Brandon, and it's an honor to be here with you guys. I've been living with epilepsy for 21 years now, and I was just like any kid. I had big dreams. My dreams were of going to the Olympics in horseback riding. I'm an avid horseback rider, and becoming a doctor. I love the human body. I find it fascinating. But then epilepsy happened, and I became the patient instead of the doctor, and getting to the farm was a struggle for me. But thanks to an incredible support team, incredible family, I was able to find solutions. I wear a top-rated safety helmet when I ride. I wear an inflatable vest that connects to my saddle. So if I do come off, I do have a seizure, it inflates in 0.09 seconds. It's kind of like a big airbag. It protects my neck, my internal organs, my spine. And I wear safety stirrups. So I have been able to continue riding. And while I wasn't able to become the doctor, I was able to find a way to advocate for people with epilepsy just like me. And I do that through an annual horse show called Dressage for a Cause. Dressage for a Cause started in 2018 with the horse show in November that is put on by my farm, and it was called the Turkey Trot. But in 2018, my barn family showed their incredible support towards Epilepsy Awareness Month and said, let's do a Call to Purple. Competitors were purple, the ponies were painted purple, and we had purple flowers. We had a lot of fun. So in 2019, we put on our first fundraiser. And it was fantastic. We were able to raise, I believe, $5,000 that first year. But the fundraiser was only kind of the first part of it. There was also an awareness part of it. I wanted to bring the epilepsy warriors who have lost their battle to epilepsy or losing their battle to epilepsy in the arena with me. So I honor those epilepsy warriors by embroidering their names on a saddle pad that I compete with. And I've been able to meet epilepsy warriors from all over the world through social media. We've got warriors from Ireland, Austria, Australia, the UK, India, Canada, and across the US. It's been incredible to meet these warriors. And unfortunately, we've lost some over the years. Unfortunately, some I never had the chance to truly meet them. But I am able to honor them in the arena. And so for the past 5 years, we have done Dressage for a Cause every year with the goal of raising funding a $100,000 research grant for a cure. This will be our 6th year. We are over halfway towards our goal. We've raised $50,000. And this year, we are actually throwing our first fundraising dinner for Cure Epilepsy. So we're excited about that. Dressage for a Cause continues to evolve in how we do our fundraising. But it's still just another day with epilepsy. So in 2020, when we had our fundraising event, I couldn't make that horse show fundraiser. Not because of COVID, like was the reason for so many, but for me, because epilepsy got in the way. And it was a 2-day event. So the first day I couldn't make it. And the second day I had the headache from hell that you get after you have a seizure. And normally that would stop me from putting on the helmet. It's too much. But then there's one of the warriors on my saddle pad is Roman the Warrior. And he has to wear a helmet every day because he has drop seizures. And he doesn't have a choice whether he gets to wear a helmet or not. So the next day, Sunday, it's the second day of the show, we put on the helmet. And we rode it in the arena for Roman because he didn't have the choice to put on a helmet. And I did. So 6 years in, $50,000 in, we are can't wait to see what this year brings. Our event will be November 16th, 17th of this year. And like Brandon said, Cure Epilepsy has been incredible in giving me the opportunity to be their pilot program, pilot intern for their new program, the Community Enrichment Program, which was designed to help people with epilepsy gain skills in the workforce. Whether you gain new skills, whether you further your skills. It is sponsored by UCB. Thank you so much. And I can't wait I've learned so much in marketing, professional leadership and development, corporate giving, individual giving. So it's really been an incredible opportunity that UCB and Cure Epilepsy have given me to be a part of. And I can't wait to see where it brings. Can't wait to.
Thank you, Channing. I swear every time that you tell your story, and I've heard it so many times now, I still learn something new. So thank you again for sharing your story with us today. So I do want to make sure that we leave some time for questions from the community. I see people have engaged with the chat function. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the screen here and kind of open it up for questions. So anybody that would have any questions, please go ahead and submit them either through the chat function or through the Q&A function, whichever you like or whatever you wish. I do have kind of a question to kick it off, though, because I'd like, Jack, maybe for you to go in a little bit further. I know that you had talked a little bit about, kind of that stigma behind epilepsy and why. Can you talk a little bit about what led you to kind of not want to talk about it right off the bat, or what kind of what was that the stigma that you found and why you didn't want to kind of talk about it at first?
Yeah, I think there was a part of me that saw it kind of as a weakness, and as I've been like in a lot of things I've done, I've tried to kind of hide the different, if there's I say exploit your strengths and build on your weaknesses behind closed doors. And I looked at this as something that I didn't necessarily want to share with my close network because I didn't want it to impact the way that they looked at me, the way that we would hang out, or I didn't want them to say, "Hey, Jack, we probably shouldn't go, out tubing or dirt biking or, do something that's a little bit more intense and something that I like." I didn't want them to say that because they would know, "Oh, Jack, hey, you probably shouldn't do that. You have epilepsy. If something happens, we won't have the resources for you." So I really tried to just kind of keep it close to the chest. I think in large part it was because I didn't want it to be out there for everybody to know. It's not like, going out and running a marathon or going and like winning with a team that you and saying, hey, everybody, like, I'm so proud of this. I'm so proud of the team or what has happened. This one was like, oh man, I just had another seizure. I want to keep that in isolation, in a vacuum, and then move on. Absolutely, almost like forget about it and move on with my life. And that, I think, once I realized that it was impacting a lot of other people and that my voice could actually benefit the group, that was probably the moment where I said, all right, enough's enough. There's no reason to hide this because you're hurting other people by doing so. You need to take this and talk about it to help others. Use your experience to help others.
Great. Yeah. And actually, I would have some questions coming in now too. But I did want to actually let Channing kind of, can you just talk a little bit more about how the stigma really played a role in your life? Specifically, I know in your academic pursuits.
Yeah, so for me, the stigma was big. Epilepsy, the word seizure, that was not allowed in my family for probably 10 years. It was a problem for me, but like Brandon mentioned in academics, like I said, I have a fascination with the human body. I absolutely love it, and I wanted to learn more after I graduated high school. So I attended an EMT class at a local community college, and we had discussed my attendance in this class with the disabilities coordinator. Her brother had epilepsy, so she grew up with it. And we also discussed it with the instructor of the class. We actually knew the instructor because he was the EMT at the local horse shows and actually had worked on me at one time. And we said, we wanted to, make sure all concerns were addressed. We gave them the seizures cards we created with information, contact information. And kind of just laughed and said, it might even, be a good thing if it happened and be a learning opportunity. So we kind of made a light of it. But then, so the class started, it was going well. And then inevitably I have a tonic-clonic in the class. The instructor did wait about 40 minutes to call my parents. And the next day I received an email from the disabilities coordinator that said my seizure was too much of a disruption in the class. And because of that, that's when the schools can ask the students to leave. We didn't want to take a legal route in this. We wanted to change the school's mentality. So if a person with epilepsy wanted to pursue the same path I did, they wouldn't have that challenge, that wall to beat against. They would more be welcoming into the class. So that was the stigma that I ran into as far as academics. I will say I put a great victim. That I can say. But yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that I hate hearing that story every time you tell it, but I admire your willingness and your desire to not want to make an example, but or to actually have them correct their wrongdoings, and that for future people with epilepsy. And my understanding is they have corrected that since you're.
Yeah, we they were provisions were made in the student handbook, so it was a success.
Right. Thank you. So actually, one of the questions that came in from someone here says, as a young professional with recently diagnosed with epilepsy, how do you not let it get in the way of advancing your career? Either one of you, Jack, you wanted to kind of kick that one off?
Sure. You have to be hard-headed for sure. And I think just looking at it as a part of your life, and once you are accepting of that and saying, hey, it's okay, we can move forward and I can still accomplish so much of what I wanted to do, but I would encourage you to take this as almost a gift, and you will find new ways to accomplish goals that you might not have ever thought of before. And this new path that you're on is no better, no worse. It's just a new path. And so I think just being resilient and understanding that this is an opportunity. It's not a disability. And if you'd ever like to connect, certainly connect with this group. I'd be happy to personally connect with you. It means so much when people are going through this, especially when they just learn. We've all been there. Channing and I have been there. It's not easy to get that news, but how you turn it around and make the best of it will be something incredible, I promise you.
Could I add to that too? It's just assuming that you're someone who works at Exelon or ComEd, reach out to Enabled. That's one of the reasons we're here, to be an advocate for you and to just talk to you about it and to empathize and just to be there. And I think just from my personal experience as being a caregiver, the more you talk about it, the easier it is to talk about it, and the just it is a huge weight off of you as opposed to like keeping a secret. It does become a source of strength. So reach out to me, reach out if whether or not you're in ComEd. I'm the ComEd chapter president, but reach out to any one of us, and we're here.
Great. Channing, did you want to add any to that? I know kind of Channing did the great pitch. One of our newest programs this year was actually inspired quite a bit by her. But this was our community enrichment program where we really want to, we understand the importance of the patient voice, like you heard Jack say, in research. Well, we want to take that even a step further and incorporate the patient voice in everything that we do as a nonprofit organization. So I did go ahead and secure funding for this program that not only provides a paid position or an internship for the person with epilepsy, but also gives them kind of paid training skills and professional development skills that they can take along the way, as well as there will be the release of Channing Spotlight video that's coming up here probably in the next 3 weeks. We actually did a day in the life video where we actually got to go down to Channing's house, meet her family, get to visit her barn family, get to visit Perla, her horse, my new best friend, Bishop, her seizure alert dog. And it was truly one of the best experiences of my time at Cure Epilepsy. And I can't wait for it to come live on video. So stay tuned for that as well. But Channing, do you want to kind of talk a little bit about kind of what that, like, kind of what it means to you, kind of maybe things that you've learned as you started to, the professional development and started to advance your careers professionally? Any hardships that you found or any advice that you've learned?
Yeah, like Jack said, hard-headed. But I think one of the main things for me, you've got to kind of push your limits so you know where those limits are. Kind of, and you may have to take 2 steps back to take 1 step forward. But you're not going to know exactly how much you can do in that professional world, what you're capable of, unless you do push yourself to that. And I think that's kind of, and that can take a while to find the balance. Maybe you do need to, you've got, a good couple hours in the morning, but then maybe you need to lay down, finding a schedule that works for you. So just kind of slowly but surely finding what works for you and making sure you do kind of push those limits just a little bit, just to make sure you do know what you're capable of. That's kind of has been big for me.
Yeah, that's very important and very big, and I'm happy that we were able to kind of find that balance, because I know Jack and I had a long conversation, it was just a couple weeks ago, about I remember the first time Jack, I think he emailed me or maybe he called me about running the LA marathon for us. And needless to say, I never in a million years thought that conversation was going to lead to Jack now like being like spearheading all of these initiatives for the patient involvement within, post-traumatic epilepsy research. It's been quite an evolution of your involvement with the organization. But I'm so happy that it's come to that. Can you kind of talk a little bit about how you kind of you went from not talking about epilepsy to now embracing that word, and now kind of, you could argue, potentially making a career out of it. Can you kind of talk about what's that meant to you? What's that meant to others in your life as well?
Yeah, well, thank you. And it's just been such an honor, obviously, working with Cure Epilepsy. And it's been incredible to see that transformation between the overall community of saying, hey, let's kind of keep it quiet. We don't want it to impact our personal life, our professional life, just like Channing's talking about. But we want to push our limits, and we want to see how far we can go. I'm sure anybody who is very competitive or wants to, has been successful or wants to, you have dreams, you have goals, you will push yourself too far. And some of it is just you're super stubborn like me, and you just want to keep going, and you want to almost run this thing over. I've seen this incredible transformation of, certainly in the research domain, for epilepsy, for traumatic or post-traumatic epilepsy, as well as TBI, where folks have kind of said, hey, let's incorporate this lived experience to kind of keep ourselves accountable. Let's make sure that we're focusing on major issues that folks with epilepsy are really having. And that has been turning my story into an impact that I can see and that I can hold institutions accountable for, and say, hey, this is not an issue that you're focusing on. This is how you communicate with them. This is how you can work with them. These are the impacts that need to be made. And using my experience is just, it's been incredible to see that it really can make an impact. And from having grand mal seizures, drop seizures, petit mal seizures, hundreds and hundreds over the last 10, 12 years, to be able to take that and turn it into something that institutions, that private companies can say, hey, we need that. And in fact, we are hiring you with the understanding that you're going to have bad days, that you can't drive, that you're going to have issues, working out the logistics of a trip that we're asking you to make. This has all come full circle to, it's like, wow, I can now have a career where people are actually totally understanding of what I've gone through in ways, and say, we want that. We want that. We want to empower you to talk more about it, to be a part of this, a WebEx, to actually share it. And they're like, we know, pardon it, but we know it sucks. We know what you've gone through probably isn't the way that you drew it up, but we now need that. And for funding, we need to have somebody on board who's been through this before. So, long story long, it's been remarkable.
I think that's all the questions I think we have addressed through the board. Yep. So I'll leave this. Any last minute statements? Anything else you'd like to add in here? Ronit, did you have any other final kind of questions or anything you wanted to make sure that we covered today?
I did actually just have, as if I was just a listener, I was wondering, Channing, where did you find the gear for riding horses that, like, it just seems so specialized and amazing. And I feel like running into this with my son too, that people's first answer is, well, you can't do that because you have epilepsy. And what I'm hearing from both of you is, You can. You just have to find workarounds. And so like that is an amazing, very specialized workaround. And how did you figure that out?
So like you, we've gotten that answer, and for me, they recommended that I collect stamps. Um, but the helmets, every year we visit Virginia Tech. They do the safety ratings, so we double check that we've got the top rated helmet. But the vest, that, if my memory is correct, and I've got a bad memory, but I believe that was initially created by a motorcycle company called Sam Shield. But I do believe it was created by a motorcycle company. And since then, the equestrian companies have created kind of their own versions, and the technology has come a long way. It's a CO2 cartridge that's kind of in, that's within the vest that will inflate the vest. And we found solutions for skiing as well. I'm an avid skier, grew up in the mountains of Colorado. We found a fantastic organization called Challenge Aspen. They had a kind of a chairlift seatbelt, if you will. And this is a climbing harness where if you cut the legs off the climbing harness, you kind of thread it through your belt loops of your ski pants. Then you connect a daisy chain to that. You thread the daisy chain around the back of the chairlift, kind of bring it through underneath the chairlift and connect it to a carabiner. You've got a chairlift or a seatbelt on the chairlift, and that's how we did that. But just different solutions, always making sure you're looking for the solutions and you don't take no for an answer. Because I leaned hard on sports for a lot, because the social aspect I struggled with that. You can't, there was no common factor. They can't relate to their lives. And so I leaned hard on sports because that's where the common factor was for me with social life, with friends and the social life. So solutions.
Yes.
Outside the box thinking.
And
Just-
I will go ahead.
One really quick thing, you say solutions, and I've always said I just have so many hacks, like ways to get around things, that at a certain point I kind of felt like my whole life was a hack, because everything I wanted to do, there was somebody or some reason that I shouldn't do it, and it was like, no, I'm gonna figure out how to get around this. There's got to be a hack to this. But you get a lot of, you generate or create a lot of hacks or solutions to fulfill your goals, your interests, and not be on the sidelines. Like, that's just not Channing and me. That's just not our style. And so I encourage that to everybody who has epilepsy, to really understand that there are ways around a lot of the things that people tell us we can't do. And that's one of our goals, is to figure out exactly how we can do it.
Great point. And actually, we did have a question come in from the Q&A, and specifically about benign Rolandic epilepsy. This woman, her son actually had this type of epilepsy and outgrew it, and wanted to know if, she asked a very good question to follow up, but just wanted to know, have any of you ever had any interactions with anyone with benign Rolandic epilepsy? I know that's a very specific type. I do actually have some connections, and I can follow up with you post webinar about those, but I just wanted to check to see if Channing or Jack had anyone.
I can't say that I have, actually. That's a new one for me.
Okay, yeah, no.
Same here. Yeah, I'll have to look into that.
Yeah. So luckily, her son outgrew that type of epilepsy, which that actually does happen. But then asked the follow-up question that there hasn't been much known about the causes behind benign Rolandic epilepsy, and how can there be a cure without a cause? That's a great question. And because it's one of the things, about 80% of the cure epilepsy research until about 3 years ago, when we launched our Catalyst program, was just looking at understanding the mechanisms, the causes, basically what's called basic science. What is going on behind the scenes that that is actually causing that seizure to happen. And until recently, that's pretty much 80% of all of our funds went straight into that realm of research. And then as we began to understand that the genetics behind epilepsy, as we began to understand what actually causes, and we're not even there yet, but like what actually, who that suffers a traumatic brain injury might go on to develop post-traumatic epilepsy, which is what one of the things Jack is so heavily involved in our specific research. We began that switch to, okay, for some of these epilepsies, we do know what that cause is. So now we can look at developing treatments and therapies for a cure. And other ones, we don't know that cause yet, but we are getting closer and closer every day. As somebody that's been in the field of epilepsy somehow for 10 years, and I never thought I was ever going to be in this field, but as somebody who's been in the field for 10 years, I've already seen us go from like a handful of genes that we knew that caused epilepsy to now thousands of genes that we know can cause or can contribute to epilepsy. It's really quite miraculous where we've come in the last 5 to 10 years. And so I imagine that many of those ones that don't have causes yet will, and that we will start to see some of those cures for epilepsies, coming down the road sooner rather than later. So, anyone else? Any other questions before we wrap up? We did take it almost all the way to the hour. So
I have one question for Jack. Just bringing it back to the Veterans Day tie-in, are you still, you're doing so much on epilepsy outreach and awareness, are you still finding yourself focused on interacting with the military and veterans, and are you getting any pushback from the military because maybe they don't, not everyone who has a traumatic brain injury develops epilepsy, and it's just I can imagine it being sort of a touchy subject that they might not want out there in the public.
Yeah, exactly. They are hesitant to connect traumatic brain injury with epilepsy and have this post-traumatic epilepsy diagnosis. So I do kind of have to toe the line on how frustrated and how I take that frustration out with the government and saying, hey, this took 10 years for you all to figure this out, but I'm a little concerned that you already kind of knew what was going on, and I want to see people held accountable. That's a natural reaction of mine. But at the same time, I want to make sure that I'm being more constructive and saying, all right, what's done is done. We now need to prepare for other veterans who have had TBIs, who haven't had a seizure yet. We need to prepare for the inevitable. They will have seizures. And so that's the VA DoD kind of discussion that we have. Then with veterans, I just say, hey, if you have had seizures or if you have had traumatic brain injuries, I want to talk with you. I want to find out how you have been, what your experience has been. How is your caregiver? How have they been doing? What is the impact that your amazing caregivers have had on you? And then I take that and I turn it around and I go to the VA and I say, we need more funding. We need more resources. Caregivers need to be involved in this. They need to be included in our approach to cure or at least manage the situations of many veterans and their families who are going through experiences like I've gone through. So it's kind of being this conduit, but making sure that I'm not ticking off the VA too much, but I'm being very blunt about the lack of resources, the lack of funding, and the lack of transparency that I am seeing and that many of us are seeing, and making sure that we hold them accountable and we improve the status of our service members, veterans, and their families.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to end this session. And Ronit, I do want to thank you for the opportunity for us to partner with you and to be able to bring Jack and Channing and share their stories. Jack and Channing, thank you again for sharing these with us. And I'll go ahead and let Ronit go ahead and wrap us up.
Yeah, I just want to say a huge thanks to all of you, to Brandon, to Jack, to Channing for talking to us and sharing your stories. I want to thank all the attendees for helping us raise awareness. I want to say happy early Veterans Day, and please keep epilepsy in mind all throughout Epilepsy Awareness Month. And if anyone has any questions, any follow-ups, you can reach out directly to me. You also have Brandon's contact information. You don't have Jack and Channing's, but we can get you in touch with them if that's what you want. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day.